estate, but the globe is owned by a Palestinian artist, Mona Hatoum, and it's currently on loan at the Museum of Anthropology out at UBC, a show on Middle Eastern art. But what the globe really represents is when one of us have a problem, we all have a problem. Boston didn't have a marathon problem. All of us, I believe, for the rest of our lives, whether you're in a marathon or watching a marathon and you look off to the side and you see an empty backpack, you're going to cringe and you're going to wonder, is today the day? So that happened in Boston, but when one of us have a problem, to me, we all have a problem. North Korea doesn't have a problem. We all have a problem. The Olympic Village didn't have a problem in 2008. All of Greater Vancouver had a problem. When America had a housing crisis problem, Victoria had a housing crisis problem. We're not insular. We can't say we're a global economy and take the benefits and not understand that we're a global economy and we've got to take the hits with it too. The downtown east side doesn't have a homeless problem. Greater Vancouver has a homeless problem. I think it's Canada's homeless problem because it is the Hawaii for the homeless, and we're carrying the weight of Canada, and we can't get the federal government to understand that. You can come up with your own analogy of when one of us have a problem. We all have a problem. I think the opposite side of the coin is when one of us have a benefit, we don't all have a benefit. If Dave's project sells out in a day, it doesn't mean your project's going to sell out in a day. We have to understand why they have a benefit. So last year, I thought I wasn't here last year, but apparently I was, so I probably touched on it. Well, that's what Kathy told me. I thought I was here 2 years ago. But Kathy told me I was here, so I would have touched on transit. Transit was our big grant last year. We did a project called Marine Gateway. And so going back and surveying, we found that 18% of our first-time buyers don't own a car. We're on transit. 25% of the last 2 buildings that we've done on transit, over 400 suites in each, have been without parking, and the market has absorbed it. I asked Robert, will his future tenant, downtown Victoria, buy a suite in Dave's building without parking? And that's pioneering over here, but they're saying yes. If you can get that price point down, it's not in my notes, but in Calgary, the biggest uptake of car-to-go in Canada was in Calgary, because they have that 900,000 square foot Encana building, and the tenants in that building, the commercial tenants have employees under 35 years old that don't rely on a car. So I made an observation, I may have made it here last year, you can remind me, that our under 30 first-time buyers noticeably forgo owning a car, not because of the costs associated with car ownership, but we believe that they forgo owning a car because of the inconvenience that parking and traffic and commitment to that car brings on, and the lack of freedom and mobility on a Friday night that comes with owning a car. And I mentioned that our young first-time buyers do not require a car to get a date. The car is no longer a status symbol, unlike the baby boomer parents. And I think that last year what I said, and I don't know whether I said it here, is the baby boomer doesn't need a car to get living. It's a really, really important observation. Their parents did. Their parents were so reliant on a car, but today everybody has their iPhone, they have their Facebook, they have their Twitter. Their social life can exist without a car, and the baby boomer parents couldn't. I think we have to really start to understand that when we're building for this first-time buyer. Well, so a couple things came out of that statement. You don't need a car to get a date. The embarrassing one is I got a very harsh letter of reprimand from an engineering firm at last year's UDI, so they don't get any projects. And serious. And the fun one was when I used this observation in Toronto, my youth in the car observation, and one other observation, that it caused me to be invited to speak last November at the Trudeau Foundation's summit on who decides the common good. And the other observation that I used that got me to the Trudeau Foundation that they were infatuated with was to keep your eye on the artists and prostitutes, because wherever the artists and prostitutes go will be the next area of change and growth in your community. Nobody likes to admit that they know where the prostitutes are. Somehow do. But if you look at Vancouver in the 80s, the mayor and council in the 80s pushed the prostitutes east of Granville Street. And east of Granville Street became the place where the prostitutes and artists were because it was cheap rent, and that's now called Yaletown. And you can track it in any city in the world. You can look in Toronto at the areas that look depressed, that are closest to those big buildings. That's the next area of growth. The theory applies to any city in the world. I've got here Ladysmith, Campbell River, Victoria, or Dallas. And it's the same as our big view equals big suite, small view equals small suite theory. And where has that gone? I've gone blank. Who's the architect? I've just gone Paul. It's Paul Merrick. Is Paul here? Where is Paul? He's way at the back. So I think that Paul and I came up with that saying together, designing a building in Cole Harbour. Paul will attribute it to me, but we were trying to figure out how to get the maximum value out of suites, and we put the elevator in the very back corner and built the building like a fan. But if you look at here, even your penthouse, David, pick on you, but the big view warrants a big suite, and the small view at the back of the building only warrants a small suite. It helps take the risk out of the building if you've lost how to do it. But then you have to marry that to the Rubik's Cube of the $99,000 guy shouldn't be with the $1 million guy. So it's just marrying that together. The artists want to be, and the prostitutes have to be, as close to those bright lights and cheap rent as possible. I think it's Richard Florida is the author that came out with "We will all move to where the bright lights are." I believe that we're all moving to where the lights are already the brightest, not just where the lights are, but where they're really bright. If you look at American cities where there's the dense population and the lights are brightest, they suffered the least through the downturn in the economy, and they came back the quickest. It's time to change. So the condominium product that you're working on today in boardrooms will be delivered by 2015 at the earliest. You're probably looking at receiving a development permit sometime in 2014. In Vancouver, that would be the end of 2014 at the earliest. So what we're really doing is trying to come up with product that we're not delivering until 2016, 17, and 18. We're doing it in a pre-sale. And the talk at the table was here that in the pre-sale, you're looking at, once you have the original launch, you're probably doing 1 to 2 sales a month. And so we're very privileged over in Vancouver, but maybe one of the things that we should look at doing on the building is designing 50 to 70% of the pre-sale in Victoria and on Vancouver Island. Maybe it's just 50%. And designing the other 50% for the empty nester, the aging baby boomer, the young war baby that wants to buy and sell on the same time. You're building 2 product types, one that has the tolerance to buy in a pre-sale, and the other one that does not have the tolerance to buy in a pre-sale. The problem with Vancouver is if it doesn't work in the pre-sale with the finished product, is why the Olympic Village is taking 3 years, you lose 60 to 70% of your buyers because we've been so investor heavy supplying the rental product to our city. But I think we have to start to look at those sort of formulas differently, because if you know what your absorption is, and that's the fact, build into it, and your bank's not going to be as disappointed when you're presenting a pro forma to them that shows 50% of pre-sale, 6% of pre-sale, and the balance happening after it's finished product, 120 days before completion, when people want to measure for the couch and actually look at the view. I'm working on 2 towers right now. We're doing the Brent, for those of you that know Burnaby and all, Vancouver. We look at Oak Ridge in Vancouver, Brentwood, and Lougheed Mall in Burnaby. Huge sites, massive parking lots. I believe Oak Ridge will have 8 towers. Brentwood, we're going to put 8 to 10 towers. Lougheed Mall, I'm not doing Oak Ridge. Lougheed Mall, we're putting 18 towers. So we have to understand if delivery is 4 to 5 years from now, what type of product will I need in the remaining inventory of it? History has shown us personally that with Shangri-La and Marine Gateways project, it have been 42 to 48 months for delivery. The investor, pre-sale buyer, absolutely loves it. And then you go back to Redmond, those deposits better be indestructible, or the banks aren't going to wait 42 months to find out if it was a real contract. The other thing I think we should all understand is the product that we're working on in boardrooms today. If we're looking at 2014 for approvals, 2014 is a municipal election year. I think it's time that maybe we lobby our newer MLAs, and we lobby Premier Christy Clark and government to change municipal elections from a 3-year term to a 4-year term. Because I think what we have now in municipal and civic elections is you have politicians spending the first 6 months climatizing and understanding the promises that they made, getting used to the new councillors, and then 18 months prior to the next election, which has started today, it's already started for November elections, the Teflon suit goes on, and nobody wants to make any commitment that they're going to have to wear around election time. So you're ending up with a 1-year government. And these are just character flaws with politicians, but we have to admit that they exist. So I think if we went to a 4-year term, at least we'd get 2 years of business out of government. I could be off base on it, but it's either that or we got to go to a 6-month term. Something has to change on it, because you're probably already having the conversations that, well, if we submit now, will we get it approved before November? Maybe we should submit next summer, or is it something that the politician can capitalize on and they'll get it through by the election? But all these things have to be taken into consideration. So if we look at inventory numbers, just 2 cities over on the mainland, is my caution here is let's be really careful and avoid identity crisis with what our cities really are. Shelley Fralick at the Vancouver Sun poked fun at me in the newspaper saying to keep my mitts off of New Westminster. And that just to me was, oh, let's go to battle. And what it was is I was giving a talk at New Westminster's Economic Summit. My family and my office have decided I can only do 4 talks a year. It wears me out, and I think I bore people on top of it. But what I did when I spoke at New Westminster, I told them that their slogan is Royal City. And growing up, I guess we didn't have enough fresh fruit in the house, but we always had Royal City canned peaches. And I told the mayor and council that I think the moniker, the slogan Royal City just reminded me of an old can of peaches. So it sort of became a little battle back and forth. But what it is, and this relates to over here, over in Vancouver, is, New Westminster's building a commercial office tower on spec. They have no tenants. They're building it because they wanted to get some federal money to move their civic center along. They've got a new brewery district down by the SkyTrain. They've got 3 SkyTrain stations. Yet they haven't figured out the cafes, the hanging baskets, the laneway retail, the boulevards. They want to hang on to that old Royal City, but they're building an office tower on spec. That just doesn't fit, because they've brought the transit, they've got residential density, and they have to understand what they are and who they are. And I think we all have to do it in any city we're working in, is ask ourselves the tough questions. You can't just throw the residential density in. You have to have the infrastructure. You have to have the ground plane that goes with it. What we found was everybody was trying to convince me that New Westminster, and you'll have cities on the island that can parallel it, that New Westminster was what Brooklyn is to New York, was what the Silicon Valley is to San Francisco, or Marin County is to San Francisco. But it's not. It has its own identity, and it has to admit what that identity is. I find too often that as Canadians, especially as Vancouverites, we're very passive-aggressive. We have an idea of what we want to do, but we really don't want to admit it in case it doesn't come through. And I think with planning, I think you have to load the table up with enough talent to really understand what you want your city to become, and then go build towards it. As we try and convince ourselves that New Westminster was what Brooklyn to Vancouver is what Brooklyn is to New York, 50% of our buyers in this 200-unit building that sold 115 all came from New Westminster. They weren't saying it was because it was Brooklyn, is they wanted to age in place. They wanted to stay in their community. So nobody's really understanding what the demographic is. And as New Westminster goes through their own identity crisis, I think they should change their name from the Royal City and maybe just change it to the New Royal City. But they better do something about it, because they can't hang on to yesterday and try and future-proof for tomorrow. And so we try and parallel it to what's going on in Surrey, and I'll just give you the high level. In Surrey, they can have a Target department store, but they can't have Vancouver's Whole Renfrew. And when you just admit those two things, that when you divide it out, you can really start to understand what demographic you should be building your residential condos for. But with Surrey, with free density, they have 16,400 condominiums approved in the city of Surrey, and 11,900 of them are in the SCC in the Surrey City Centre. How are you going to get through 11,900 condominiums that effectively could come on all in the next 36 months? They'll just cannibalize each other, and you're going to end up just dropping down to price. So I think my advice to cities like Surrey, or if you look at what happened at Bear Mountain, they should down zone in density. If you look at Surrey, I think developers have to start spending a lot more time with each other, even though you hate each other. Everyone should go for lunch, and you shouldn't really stagger your openings and stagger your product. And then if you start to look at the product that sells in pre-sale and the product that sells as finished product, then you will have unique pre-sale product competing against differentiating finished product. And this is all wishful thinking. That it's not to create a monopoly, but I think it protects the consumer a little bit more. And I think we have to start speaking out loud about it. But 11,900 condos approved. There's a city, maybe not unlike Bear Mountain. I've never been to Bear Mountain, but I just hear HSBC telling me how much they lose. But I think that the mayor of Surrey and the council have planned on massive property taxes coming into their coffers in 2016, 17, and 18, but that money may not come into their coffers now until 2021, 22, 23, and what's that going to do to taxes where they've spent all this money on infrastructure? So it all ties together. So changing topics, so on who do we believe anymore with? I think that the economists and the journalists are probably the largest speculators in the real estate market. If you look at a recent article in Canadian business, and where I'm trying to take our company to, and part of this talk, is you don't need any data to make a negative comment. You just throw it out there, it'll come up on a blog, mainstream media will pick it up as fact, and then we'll spend the next year trying to defend it. But a recent article that I read on a plane in Canadian business had some predictions by economists, and Royal LePage had Greater Vancouver at 0% undervalued. It wasn't going to fall at all. But they're in a conflict of interest, they own a real estate company. The TD had us at a 10% drop, yet they're approving buyers with 10% down, which I failed to understand, and they said the 10% drop would happen by 2014 or 15. One of the things we've talked about the last couple of years is, 2 to 3 years ago, we were pretty sure that interest rates would be up 1.5% to 2% by now. So they're not. And if you look at 2008 and 2009, when we were in the absolute depth of the housing crisis in America, and wondering whether we'd ever recover in British Columbia, we were worried that those mortgages in 2008 and 2009, when they come up for renewal, it's a bloodbath. It'll be foreclosures everywhere. So did we get a get out of jail free card? The rates are actually cheaper now than they were in 2008. Or is there a little bit of insulation around it? So David Baxter went and did the numbers for us with Urban Futures. And if you rely on Canada Census, they say that incomes go up 2.2% per year. The labor force says 2.4% per year. We use the 2.2%. And we found that if you have a 5-year mortgage, in year 6, your mortgage renewal can go up by 2.5%, and the household can still withstand it. If and you'll have the same debt service ratio. If you have a 3-year mortgage, in year 4, your household can withstand a 1.5% increase. So this takes away a lot of the mystery of what's going to happen in 5 years. We're putting young buyers in over their head. This isn't sustainable. And the two factors that come into play are incomes are rising and your amortization period is going down. We will never live through what we did 1998 through 2008, where house prices went this way, equities increased immensely, and interest rates went down. And the baby boomer, that big bubble population, we don't have that again. We've got buyers coming in and buying, hoping that the real estate prices remain the same, and wondering how far their interest rates will go up. So I think that these figures, to me, are the revolutionary. We really need them when we're talking to parents that are helping first-time buyers buy, that they are insulated a little bit in year 6 with the 5-year mortgages. I also believe that culturally, once a young couple or once a couple or anybody gets used to debt, whether they cut out smoking, whether they cut out drinking, whether they don't go to restaurants as much, whether they go from 2 cars to 1 car, that they find a way to maintain that debt. We're Canadian. We don't just walk and say foreclose on me, I'll go bankrupt. We don't have that culture of Americans. I'll just go start up again. So I think that the threat of rising interest rates isn't as bad as we thought. If rates go to double digit, then we're sitting on massive inflation anyways. It's just how do you juggle it. But back to the speculating on the market. The International Monetary Fund says that we're 10% overvalued, and that 10% drop will happen over the next 5 years. Fitch Ratings says that we're 20% overvalued, relying on heavy data from the US markets. And Capital Economics, they have us pegged for a 25% fall on home prices as it relates to household incomes, which we'll get to in a minute. And The Economist, which is my favorite, has us at 78% overvalued. And they're basing it, we're 78% overvalued based on our what it costs to rent a home compared to what it costs to rent a condo compared to what it costs to buy a condo. So if that were true, we're going to fall 78%. My 370 homes under 299 would then become 370 homes under 95,900, and we'd have to start paying plumbers probably $3 an hour in order to produce it. But it's all just speculation. So if you look at downtown, if you look at Vancouver and downtown Vancouver, we want office towers. We want office towers badly, but where are people going to live? Which is why you see an office tower viable in Victoria, where you see an office tower maybe viable in Surrey, because there's cheaper accommodation for the employees. But our city planner, Brian Jackson, is going through a rough time as he's trying to create density outside of the downtown core of Vancouver. Vaughn Palmer had in a Vancouver Sun article recently was the term banana, which stands for build absolutely nothing near anyone. And I think that we have to break that down, and if we explain to people with aging populations and increased populations are coming, that it'll be easier to break through those. The other thing that we have to understand about Vancouver and why it should be different than over here is we will not create another single-family lot in my lifetime. Unless you tear down a house on 2 lots, that's it. There's no more single-family lots coming. So, and if you look at Vancouver and the University Endowment lands, since between 2006 and 2011, Vancouver had a decrease of 875 single-family homes, while Greater Vancouver gained 12,100 single-family homes. So it's just not a market that we can cater to anymore, while juggling that they're without supply, there is no affordability. The Olympic Village, which I talked about here before, being standing inventory, 87% of our buyers are end users that came to measure the couch and look at the view and really understand what they're buying. But Vancouver traditionally hasn't had a lot of standing inventory. We're just launching the Georgia Hotel, which is center ice to me downtown. They went through the first half of closings around $1,400 a foot. The remaining inventory is coming on at about $1,100 a foot. And I'm very convinced that the empty nester in Vancouver that was hanging on for dear life for the highest price in the neighborhood will now come off the price as long as I can show them finished inventory to move into, the same as you have over here. I'll jump ahead. So the one number that I really track that really defies the economists and defies the blogs is for the last 6 years in Vancouver, only 33% of our sales have been to first-time buyers of foreign money. 67% of our sales have always been to somebody that's already owned a home. And 70% of those 67% have always bought a more expensive home than their last. But that, to me, that's all changing now, is with our aging baby boomer and what they can afford to buy and their new conservative thinking. So we as a company had to ask ourselves that is the 67% of sales to existing homeowners even a sustainable figure? Is that something that Vancouver can carry on? And my simple answer is yes, but then we have to understand the other 30%, but we have to break down who that 67% are when we look at homeowners. And the number one group is our baby boomer. The baby boomers, a lot of them in this room, are 49 to 67 years old. And then there's group two, which we identified last year, and we talked about it, is there's 113,000 homes in Vancouver that are clear title, owned by 56 to 75-year-olds. $88 billion in clear title real estate. And what's important about that $88 billion is not just the equity, it's that they're 56 to 75 years old. And you look at what's going to happen over the next 15 years old. So the 56 to 75-year-olds, they're sitting on the $88 billion. It was only worth $66 billion 7 years ago. So they have a huge equity gain, tax-free, which helps explain why 70% of them were buying a more expensive home than their last. So far, I've got 67% of sales to existing homeowners. 70% of them used to buy a more expensive home than their last, and I've got this population sitting on $88 billion in real estate. So then you add in that over the next 15 years in British Columbia, we're going to see that 55 to 64-year-old population increase by 23 years. I do everything with 15 years. I do it to 2027 because I figure by then I'm out. That's all I really care about is me. But if you look at that increase, that's 384,000, a population of 384,000 in British Columbia that will fall into that 55 to 74-year-old demographic. And then that next demographic up of 65 to 74-year-olds, that will increase by 69%, by another 322,000 of them. So it starts to, what should we be designing? What should we be designing for this aging baby boomer that doesn't have the money left over that they thought they would have left over? They don't have the discretionary income that they thought they would have. So in the 75 plus population increases from 154,000 today to 269,000. That's a 75% increase. And that working 35 to 54-year-old will only be 30% of our population by 2027. So we need immigration. We need immigration just to have workers. Because who's going to pay for all the health care if you look at it? And so I talk that Tracy and I did, Tracy's the president of our company, with BCIT students recently, is I told them for the next 15 years, I believe we're on the threshold of a new consumer. We have an amazing opportunity to help identify this emerging aging demographic and their housing needs. Watch as the risk-adverse baby boomer hangs on tight to what they have left. They no longer will buy a home that's more expensive than their last. The baby boomer will be 64 to 81 years old within 15 years. So the conversation we had while we were eating came up that if someone sells their home, they want to buy a condominium and have enough money left in the bank so that they can travel and live a great life. And my observation is that they want to sell their home, buy a condominium, and have no debt left. They've already sold the second car, they're down to one car. They want to have enough money left to still golf and go to Starbucks every day. that, or you cannot stay in your own community. If you want to have money left in the bank, you're going to have to leave the community you're in and go to another community. Whether that's somebody from Victoria has to go up island, or somebody from Vancouver has to come to Victoria, or somebody from Alberta, Victoria, the only way to get money in your pocket is to leave your jurisdiction. West Side buyers, the 60 homes that we have on the water with the Olympic Village, buyers from the West Side just fell in love with it. They sold their home, and 31% of them bought a condominium in the Olympic Village waterfront, of $1 million or more or lesser value than their home, so that they could go out and help their kids. But it's not just an emerging demographic, it's here, so we have to address it properly. It's not speculation. They have to maintain their lifestyles. And they also promise their children and their grandchildren the house money will look after all of us, or they've been treating the house a little bit like an ATM, so it's not there. So now they want to maintain, they're going to have to sell the home to maintain their lifestyle and their health care. You cannot consider developing in Greater Vancouver or Vancouver Island without paying close attention to this demographic. The increase in the 65 to 75 plus demographic over the next 15 years in Greater Vancouver alone, just the Greater Vancouver, is 250,000. And BCIT was thinking the same thing as you, is who's going to buy the $88 billion so that these people can free up their money. Well, I mentioned already that in Greater Vancouver, the population will increase by 23.88% in the next 15 years. That's 590,000 people. But Greater Vancouver's net immigration is probably the lowest it's been in the last 12 years. Over the next 15 years, we'll see 37,000 people immigrate to Vancouver. Not